All right. Here with my old college roommate, best friend, comedy partner, Rufus. And we were discussing quite a few things recently, but um, we came upon talking about comic book movies in general. And I thought this would be a good discussion for our first show together, our first episode. It's not a podcast. I don't want to call it that. This is just a show. We're just having fun. So, Rufus, why don't you introduce yourself, say what you're about, and we'll go from there.
So we're just chatting, we're not podcasting.
Yeah, let's just consider it a chat because I don't even know how to upload this to an online. Like outside of
Okay.
YouTube, I don't know how to put this anywhere
So we're
with
just gonna
audio.
chat. It's in public. It's like we're on the subway and we're just loud. Everyone hears our business.
That's that's exactly what it is, actually. Yeah, we're both
All
from New
right.
York, so this works.
I'm Rufus. Uh we were college roommates. Guess I think you were more into comic books than I was at one that point because I remember you were trying to explain Green Lantern to me at one point. And
Well,
I was like,
that's actually what I was going to
who has
discuss
ever
with
heard of
you.
Green Lantern? Like who the fuck is this?
When
And
we were in when we were in college, comic book movies were not, or comic books. It was very different than now. Like you're saying, we were big. I know the thing we connected on was Batman. The thing that we
yeah,
first, because the Batman movies came out, like Dark Knight came out while we were living together. We saw that opening night. You actually made me look at through the video game. You gave me interest in the animated series
okay.
and made me relook at that a little bit.
Because I
But
borrowed your PS2 to play
yeah,
that
yeah,
video
you got
game.
it. That's right. Yeah, and I remember I was sitting there watching it, and I was like, "This is actually way darker than I remember." Because as a kid, I only watched it a little bit. I didn't really pay much attention to it. So, um, but yeah, I knew that you had interest in Batman.
Yeah.
And then otherwise, we were just kind of nerds in general. So
Yeah, I mean, I
that's
grew
that.
up
But go
with
ahead.
Adam West Batman, and then I read like a bunch of the Silver Age Batman comics because that's what my dad had like in the house was
Yeah.
Silver Age Batman, some Silver Age Superman. So I guess Silver Age DC, but I was never like really exposed to the Flash or to Green Lantern, Wonder Woman, anything outside of those two until probably college.
Well, they also weren't even in the zeitgeist. It's not like there were ways for you to find them if you weren't going out of your way to find them. So
Well, you would go to a comic book shop.
yeah, but even then, well, as we were getting older, that
Kids,
wasn't even that common.
there
Yeah, that
were there
wasn't.
were stores you would
Yeah,
physically walk into, and
kids.
the comics were made out of paper, and they had ink to show the colors. And
Oh, there we go. Much better. Gallery. Um,
our comic book store in my town, that the guy who ran it was convinced Disney had stolen his idea for gargoyles. So anytime you'd
okay.
walk in, he would try and sell you
Hey,
on his lawsuit against Disney for stealing his designs for the gargoyles. He had a big display up of his
Gar
gargoyle drawings.
I don't remember the car. I remember the cartoon when it came out because they were pushing it to our age group, but I don't remember watching it. But I do remember nowadays, as I walk through comic conventions, they're a big deal for some reason. I
I
wonder if that guy
remember
really did invent them and he had an actual claim.
I remember seeing it and not finding it entertaining.
On an offshoot from that, are you familiar? You know Ice Age, the Ice Age movies, right?
Yeah, I know what they are.
You're familiar. I mean, I think I saw the first one 20 years ago, but
There's a chipmunk
there's
thing.
there's the little chipmunk that like he chews on things and then it
Uh-huh.
causes. So apparently, some crazy woman that used to be involved with the Howard Stern show came up with that, and they stole it.
Uh-huh.
Like Disney stole it from her, and she sued them. And for years, she was just going around with T-shirts of Mickey Mouse having sex with the animal, and
Okay.
she thought that was going to help her case. And it was just really, I just thought of that immediately. But the minute you said that, I thought of that. It was really
Well,
interesting. So
there's a
scrap.
lot of like every time there's a really successful thing, there's a whole bunch of people who had a similar idea that
Yeah,
they at one
exactly.
point sent to producers somewhere, and then the producers like didn't read it, and then they also made a similar movie.
And before
But
you know it, that's yeah,
well,
that's
it's always kind of plausible, but it's always also like ideas that are in the zeitgeist already that are being put into film format. Like,
I, every story has been told in one way or the other. It's really what
right.
variation
Well,
you can put on it. Yeah.
like one of the first Batman comics is literally a word for word plagiarism of Zorro. Oh, not Zorro, of the Shadow.
Yeah.
Like they literally took the Shadow story that had been published in the Pulp magazine and
Hmm.
turned it into a Batman comic. And later on, they were like, "Well, we didn't really intend this to be published. This was just to show publishers what this
What we
was,
could do.
what we could do, which was plagiarize the Shadow."
But wasn't that also for years? If Bob Kane, he's for decades he was the guy that created Batman. But then you look at what he made as Batman. It was a guy in like a yellow suit,
Yeah,
like with fired guns and stuff.
he had like traced over a Tarzan drawing,
Yeah,
and it
it
was
was
that
not.
red
It was
suit,
not his
and
own
he was
creation.
like, and it was Bat Dash Man,
Hmm.
um, and then he hired other people to actually make it into Batman as we know it, or close
Yeah.
to as we know it. So he, but he forever wanted to be credited as the sole creator of Batman.
Hmm.
Yeah,
And that I remember that the other guy basically got screwed. I forget his name now, which was unfortunate. I could look it up, but that's
Finger,
okay.
Bill Finger, I
But
think.
Finger, I thought it was Bill Finger. I didn't want to say that and be wrong, but okay. So we have some nerd credentials basically. So when something in the nerd zeitgeist comes out, we at least look at it.
Usually, yeah, yeah.
Usually, we or at least we're aware of it because people we talk to, people we hang out with, are talking about it. So what got the Marvel thing started? Because I knew of Marvel as a kid. We had the Spider-Man cartoon.
Right.
There was an X-Men cartoon that was pretty popular. Other than that, though,
Da-na-na-na-na-na.
okay, yeah, exactly.
Da-na-na-na-na-na. Yeah, yeah, I know that. Yeah.
Apparently, they redid it now. I haven't seen that yet, um, but what basically around I never saw Blade. Blade I think is the first official
Okay.
Marvel movie that because there was the Fantastic Four
Right.
that Roger Corman made, but that was made purposely just to be a tax write-off or something. That was made to never see the light of day.
Right. There's one that was not actually released of
Yeah,
Fantastic Four. Yeah.
I think it was from 94. So I'm not counting. So I'm saying, okay, Blade 98 is the start. I never saw Blade, but then you had X-Men in 2000, Spider-Man a couple of years after. And then that kicked off this new wave of superhero movies because we had the Batman movie in 89. I don't want to talk too
Right.
much about DC tonight, but we had the Batman movie and a couple sequels, and that kind of killed off DC and superhero movies and everything for a few years.
That
So
wasn't
when
Superman 4, whatever, the nuclear.
Superman 4, where he saved the whales or something, that was terrible in the 80s. And then Batman 4 with Arnold Schwarzenegger. I mean, it's campy and it's silly now in
Yeah.
retrospect, but at the time it really hurt things. So when X-Men
Yeah.
came out, it was like, oh crap, this is a good movie now. These are realistic. And
Well, I remember coming out about the movie with Schwarzenegger at age 10 or
Batman and
whatever.
Robin, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And my mom asked me what I thought about it, and I was like, well, Batman was in it.
That's all you could say.
Yeah,
Even as a 10-year-old, I remember my like after the movie, my parents being like, or my dad especially being like, that was bad. And even
yeah.
I didn't like it. I bet the one before that I kind of liked. So,
It's hard to get a kid
but
who's like into Batman and take him into a movie, and not they're not gonna excited
and
about
they're
what they
not into
saw.
it. Especially, yeah, and they tried to make it for kids, which was the irony. We liked the one more that was not made for kids because kids never like
Well,
stuff
that's
that's made
always the
for them.
way. Is
Yeah,
like if you're talking down to someone, like even a kid, they're gonna
yeah,
recognize that and be like,
yeah.
this is dumb on purpose."
Exactly. Yeah, treat them real. Come and treat them with respect, and they'll like it better. So,
Yeah. So Marvel,
but but anyway, so
or as
Marvel.
I
So you
call
had a
it,
good.
Shazam.
We can get into that. That's a whole nother episode, to be honest. I never understood that whole thing. We could do a deep dive. But so you had three Spider-Man movies. You had
Sam
two
Raimi,
Fantastic
right?
Four movies. You had, I believe, three X-Men. You had two Ghost Riders. You had two Punisher movies. So that's like a lot of movies in a
You
short
had
amount of
Ben
time.
Affleck as the
You had
Daredevil.
Ben Affleck as Daredevil. You had Jennifer Garner as Elektra. So you had a lot of. All of a sudden, Marvel was like, boom, let's do a million movies, but they didn't own any of them. They were all sold out to Sony and all this. So that
Right.
was kind of a mess.
There was a Hulk movie.
There was a Hulk movie. There was
in
actually
like
well, there was
'04 or
two, but
something.
one's technically MCU. They claim it, but
Right.
basically, there's Hulk movies that are kind of floating out there in the ether also.
Yeah.
And there was a lot. So at that point, DC was dead. In '05, Batman came back, and it was a pretty good movie. I thought
Right.
Batman Begins, and then in '08,
I had
Dark Knight was
quibbles, but
huge.
yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't think any of those Batman movies were perfect, but I think compared to everything else, like I still put them. We could talk about this
Well,
later, but I
right. I
still
mean,
put
it
them
went
pretty
back to
high
the
up.
gritty
Yeah,
ish Batman when they had gone, because it oscillates between campy and gritty.
it does. Yeah, they always have to go too far in one direction and then pull it back, and then
Yeah,
basically
yeah.
advertisers or producers tell them you can't do this.
So we're in
So
'08,
that's yeah, but no. So in '08, but then at the same time in '08, you had Iron Man come out.
right?
And so, did you see Iron Man in the theater? I
I
remember I
think
went and
so.
saw it in the theater because
I think.
for some reason Iron Man was a big deal. I don't know why.
Well, I
Um,
think I saw it, but I resented seeing it because I was like, "Who's ever? This is a minor Marvel character. I don't care about
yeah, right.
Marvel. I don't care about Iron Man. Like, who cares,
I
right?"
It was a movie, but I never would have thought it would have led to so much. I was like, oh, it's an okay movie. I don't hate Robert Downey Jr. It's like it was watchable, but
I mean, I remember coming out think liking it. Like,
yeah,
I was like, I didn't expect this to be as good as it was.
no,
And I like the concept of like he goes through a character arc, kind
yeah,
of. He's still a jerk in the end, but he's like learned. Excuse me.
no, you're fine.
Um, he's learned to like something. Um,
Well, he's learned
and
what was wrong with what he was doing and stuff, and how to help.
yeah,
He
he's
has learned. He
he
definitely had an
solved
arc. Yeah,
he solved his problem with intelligence, also with violence, but with intelligence. So
yeah.
you know, there are some things about him that are admirable. Um, yeah. So I was like, okay, yeah.
No, it's they set up John Favreau, good director as far. I'm not a movie,
Mm.
reviewer, but I thought he did a good job. So after that, there was the Hulk movie. I didn't really pay attention to that.
Yeah, I
That
think
was
I
around
saw
the
that
same time.
once,
I saw it once and it was just forgettable,
and it
just
was like
completely out of my
Edward
mind.
Norton, right?
It was Edward Norton as the Hulk, yeah.
And they've changed him,
They've changed the Hulk probably as many times as they've changed Superman now.
right?
But the Hulk is even less memorable because he's green half the time. He's not even himself, so it doesn't
Right.
matter who's there. Um, they had the Punisher sequel that summer, which was not part of the MCU, but
Okay.
I saw that actually this year, and I really enjoyed it for being what it was. But after after Iron Man, we stopped living together in 2010. So I looked that up. When we were no longer living together, Captain America hadn't even come out yet. I believe Thor was coming out that summer or had just come out, but I didn't even watch Thor when it came out because I didn't care.
Mhm.
Um, and then you had Captain America, and I enjoyed, in retrospect, I definitely enjoyed both of those movies, but I basically tuned out of Marvel movies at the beginning. Like I saw Iron Man and then I didn't care again until Avengers came out. So I don't know, what was your experience with all those?
I think I saw most of them in the theaters, but I don't think I because Thor is not a character I cared about.
Yeah.
Captain America, I've seen Captain America places, not a character I cared about, not a plot I enjoyed. Um, so I just kind of like went to them and was like, fine, whatever, this is fine.
Yeah, but exactly, it was nothing earth-shattering. And
Right.
then Avengers seemed like a good movie that even if you didn't see the other ones, it established everyone, you could have a good time. I thought it was great. I don't know if I saw it in the theater or not, but Avengers was what probably got me hooked again
But at
into
that
the
point,
whole
it was
Marvel
like
universe.
a big cultural
I
thing, right? Like
believe by the
there
time
was
Avengers
Iron
came out, it was a
Man
big deal. Yeah.
stuff everywhere. There were
Mm,
toys. There were like everything was Iron Man,
yeah.
right?
I'm not sure. I think Iron Man 2 actually came out before Avengers. So he basically had two movies to really
Right.
establish himself. And it was Robert Downey Jr. So, and he was at that point already the godfather of the MCU and stuff. So,
So okay, so this is something that bugged me about those movies was Robert Downey Jr. had famously like recovered from drug addiction
yeah.
or use, whatever. Then he's playing a character where the one thing I know about Iron Man from the comics is the arc where he's an alcoholic, right?
Yeah,
And they never address it.
they completely
Like they
avoid
have
it.
there's a scene where he's drunk.
Well, yeah, they even cut some scenes, I believe, in the second movie where he's drunk. They trying
Right.
to explain because I believe the demon in the I've actually went back and read that demon in a bottle where he's dying from is it whatever in the comics his version of the injuries were,
Mm-hmm.
or the suit was killing him, whatever it was, and he was just drunk all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a big deal, especially with modern day with the amount of alcoholics and stuff. You figured that would be a poignant story to tell, especially with someone that came through it themselves. Maybe they'd and they filmed it or at least parts of it, so it's not like they
Mm-hmm.
didn't want to affect Robert and say, oh, we don't want him near alcohol. I don't know.
Well,
It is
I mean,
interesting. Yeah.
there's kind of like an irony there because comics are kind of looked down on as the medium that's goofy for children, doesn't
Hmm.
tackle serious stuff.
Yeah.
But then the movies have taken kind of a lighter tone than the comics in not addressing
Well,
that
they
stuff.
I mean, comics was always a medium that was able to test the boundaries. I remember with I forget if it was the same story or around the time I bought a couple Spider-Man graphic novels from, they weren't from the 70s, but they were reprinting stories from the 70s. And one of them was when Harry Osborn was addicted to drugs. And that was like a huge deal to print that in the 70s and stuff. And then I
Right.
remember in 2000s when I was in high school, Green Lantern, the writer for Green Lantern at that point was on the Real World TV show from MTV in like 1993, and he
Okay.
was best friends with Pedro, the guy on the Real World who had AIDS, and then eventually died. So it like changed a lot of people's perspective because Pedro was one of the first people in the public eye that had AIDS and was, I hate, quote unquote normal or something, whatever people's perceptions were in 1992 and three of people with AIDS. So anyway, but it changed the writer's life, and then all of a sudden in 2003, he's writing all these, not all these, but some stories in Green Lantern that were woven in about people getting beaten up for their preferences and stuff. So
Well, there
so
were
comic books, yeah, has always been able to tackle things earlier than other medium, I think.
there were like
Maybe more
stories
freely.
about what was it, Speedy, ironically
Yeah,
named, was a heroin user,
yeah,
the Green Arrow's sidekick, and then I think it was later in the 2000s, but there was a sexual assault story about Sue Dibney's wife in
yeah. No, not Sudan. Yeah, that's elongated man, right? There
that's
was
Dibney, that's Ed, what's his name?
I'm going blank.
Something Dibney, and his wife was Sue,
Ralph
and she
Dibny was the
was
plastic
Ralph
man.
Disney. That's who I'm
Yeah.
Dibney.
Well,
Yeah,
I believe she was killed in one of the, I don't know. But either way, yes,
but yeah.
there
So
was
it
assault
was a
stories.
dark
They have a lot of
story.
darkness. So then
Yeah,
as you get into the movies, you have a lot of things you can cover, but then you have Marvel who needs things to be sterilized for kids to buy toys from.
right.
So
And Disney to
and Disney even worse now. So let's go into phase two real quick then, because
yeah.
so we talked about phase one. Phase two, it's basically just all the sequels. Stories are continuing now. We know who the players are. We can dive into action a little faster. The standout for me was Winter Soldier. Just great movie all around, great espionage movie. Again, you don't need to be a Captain America person to watch that and enjoy it, in my opinion. The rest of phase two, it was all kind of all right, whatever. Like, nothing really jumped out except for Guardians of the Galaxy,
Mm.
where that was so different than everything else we'd seen. And again, it had a good story, it had good characters, there was an arc. All those things you'll see, like that actually matters in these movies, and a lot of them ignore it. So I know you liked Guardians.
Yeah, I
Go
liked Guardians.
ahead.
That I mean, that was probably the first one of the Marvel cinematic that I actually like. Thought this is a good movie. This is targeted to me. Um,
Yeah.
Probably all of them are targeted to me, but to varying degrees because I'm a nerdy white guy in the right age demographic. But I mean, I guess that was the era when it started to be like, oh, okay, instead of having a bunch of disconnected movies loosely based on all these properties, they're all telling a kind of cogent, unified story. Like that's kind of interesting because it used to be you would have some Superman movies and some Batman movies and some Spider-Man movies, but nothing was like the same connected. Like in the comics, for a long time, they were separate. and then they started doing like World's Finest kind of crossovers and stuff, and then
Yeah.
eventually it was like everything owned by the same company, they can share characters, um, and
Hmm.
then it stopped being like a special thing that happened every so often. Then it was just normal. You would see Flash would show up in a Batman or whatever.
Well, it was certainly a complaint I remember people had in early movies was like, there's this world of catastrophe going on. Why isn't anyone else showing up to help? Like at this
Mm,
point, you could call Superman. Like I know you don't want to look weak and say, let me call Superman, but like, hey, I kind of need his help at this point. So it never made sense. So Marvel did an amazing thing where the movies did feel connected. And again, it's not like you Guardians, it tied in at the end with the gem and all that stuff, but it wasn't, again, you didn't need to do homework for that movie. There was
right,
no, you
and
know,
they did kind of they did kind of make it so that any of those movies, even the sequels, you could walk in and kind of watch it. And even if you haven't seen the previous one,
yeah,
if you know, you can figure it out, right? This is not a heavy diet of previous films you have to watch to participate in
yeah.
MCU stuff.
And I think
They would have Easter eggs, but
that was a smart way to do it. And that was the way they did it, I think, for all of them going into that first ending, as we'll say, like phase three, again, sequels, they're all fun. We're telling advanced stories now. My only complaint, which was something I've always had a problem with for superhero movies to varying degrees, some have been worse than others, is that they rushed through storylines. For instance, in Spider-Man, he fought Green Goblin forever. Like it's still going on. It's
mm-hmm,
been decades. And Spider-Man also was in high school for like decades of his comic book. The
mm-hmm,
first Spider-Man movie, he graduates high school in like 10 minutes in. And by the end of the movie, Green Goblin's dead. So now you've wasted a ton of storylines of him being a kid. I mean, I know it was Tobey Maguire and it's tough to have a 30-year-old in high school,
mm-hmm,
but you've killed that off and then you've immediately killed off his biggest adversary. So in the second movie, you bring in Alfred Molina to be Doc Ock, probably Spider-Man's second biggest adversary. He has a great arc. By the end, you have to kill him again. So now you've lost all these stories that you could tell and all this lore. And I think it started probably with the Batman 89 movie where he killed the Joker, or Joker kind of killed himself, or it was they both kind of had a hand in it. But it's like you didn't need to kill off the Joker. You could do
well,
you could do a million more stories with that. And I know for movies they kind of like that finality that the good guy won. But, it's
I think
I
one
don't
of
know.
the things I could complain about the way comic book storytelling works is that there is never a conclusion to a story, right? Because you know, Robin's dead. Yeah, right. Well, he's coming back eventually, right? They'll bring him back because
Even
no
even
one is ever
25,
dead.
sometimes it's 25 years later, but it will happen. Yeah.
No one's ever dead permanently in comic books.
Yeah.
Like no storyline is ever just set down forever because they keep
Mm.
going back to the same stuff. So there's very little satisfying as far as being a self-contained story with a beginning, middle, and end. The
Yeah.
way we're used to thinking of stories, you can just pick. Well, it used to be you could pick up a comic book and it had like a story in 24.
A single issue was a story. You didn't need
Yeah.
to have 50
Um,
connections. Yeah.
Now it's not so much the case. Uh, but you know, at that, but I can understand why if you're making a movie and you get the money from investors or whatever studios to make a movie, you have $100 million. You don't know there's going to be a second one, right? So you
Yeah.
have to tell a story. Well, how do you end the story with Spider-Man and Green Goblin? Do you set it up so you do another Spider-Man Green Goblin movie that might not be made for 5 years? All the actors are too old, and like, no, I mean, maybe the best way to end that story is this conflict ends with one of the characters dying.
It does put a definitive end, and you can't really have Green Goblin go to jail. Like that doesn't make sense. He's a supervillain. They don't go to jail.
Right. I mean,
At least in the movies, they don't.
they've done that when they with super jails, right? But
Yeah.
usually only when there's a breakout from super jails. That's the
They're
2014 Spider-Man
you put him in
game,
just
right?
to have him break out. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
exactly. There's no.
That's Arkham Asylum is
Yeah.
a revolving door.
which I thought they treated well in the Batman movies. But okay, no, that's a really okay. I didn't think of it that way. It's a good point. So fair enough. But okay, but on the subject of homework now, as we get into phase three with Marvel, and then beyond phase three, which is what we're in now, I think, currently with the TV shows and all that crap, we really are in the, like you said, in comics used to have a definitive story, and then somewhere in time it became that when you opened a comic, it was like at the end it would tell you read this issue, or the story continues, and it was like it was never just in Batman. It was Batman, and then you had to go to Superman, and then to Green Lantern. So it really the movie started mimicking that, where
Mm,
you had to sit through the like it became it wasn't like let's tell the now it was like I just want to see the movie to see what the end credits secret reveal is going to be. So, but so my question, I don't even know if I have a question, but I'm just kind of mentioning that I felt there was a lot of homework as we got later in the MCU where you had to know things just to watch the movie. And then I felt like it was just getting to be a nostalgia fest or a hey, check this little thing out from the comics fest. He's coming next. And by now
hmm.
we've really scraped the entire barrel of everything.
Right.
Like we've run through Captain America. He's retired. Iron Man's dead. Um, and I don't know what, it just seems like
Well,
they rushed. I know it was a 15-year period, but it does seem like they've kind of shot their gun a little early.
I remember there was a period in grad school where I tried to follow Batman at the comic book store, like subscribe to get the issues.
Yeah.
This was the first time I ever had like any amount of money, and I was
Yeah.
like, okay, $3, I can afford that a month. And then, so you can't just do Batman; you need Batman and Robin.
Yeah.
And can't just do Batman and Robin and Batman. You need Detective Comics.
Yeah.
And at the time, there was Batman Incorporated, so you need four things.
Yeah.
And then to follow, well, now there's a storyline that crosses over with Flash, so you need Flash too. And oh, it's in Green Lantern. And oh, so it's like $50 a month by the time
Yeah.
by the time
Just
you're
to read one story, basically. Yeah.
just to follow one story. So it just I just kind of stopped reading comics because I couldn't afford
Yeah.
that then. I can't afford it now, even just to keep up with the story in the comics. And then the same thing happened with the movies, like you said, where there was TV shows then, right? Because they had Agent Carter and they had Agents of Shield and they had the Netflix shows at some point, which got to
But
varying degrees
they were kind of
retconned.
self-contained though.
Right,
Yeah. They
because they
weren't those
didn't want
weren't
to
but those
have
were
to
also,
reference
yeah.
them, right?
Exactly, yeah.
Um, so I guess they recanonized Daredevil to some degree because they
Hmm.
brought the actors back for a new thing, killed half of them. Uh,
That's another thing I didn't even watch. It's like they just threw so much at us in such
yeah.
a small amount of time.
Well, I mean, when you get to the post Endgame stuff, we'll talk about that. But yeah, so the
Yeah.
all that stuff was leading up to Endgame, and it started to be like, well, you really won't understand Endgame unless you've watched every end credit scene from the past. And it stopped being like, oh, it's fun. There's going to be an Easter egg. They'll show us something else they're making, and it'll be like a character that we're supposed to recognize. Howard the Duck, uh, whatever. Um,
I I wish he was in the background of the big fight at the end of Endgame. That would have been nice.
yeah,
Or Infinity. I forget which one was the second one. Was it Infinity
Endgame.
War was the second one, I think.
No, I
Or
think
Endgame was the second.
Endgame
No,
was the
Infinity
last
War
one
was I think Infinity
because it
War
has
was the
end in
second
the
one.
title.
Well, no, because I think Doctor Strange says now we're in the end game.
Doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. Who gives a shit? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's talk about those movies then. Go ahead. Let's because
The
that's the culmination of Marvel, basically. I don't know if
right.
it's ever going to get back to that. I don't think it can
I mean, so those
in
were
its current form.
a big deal, right? Like everyone watched
Yeah.
those. And the plot was kind of dumb. Like, like I just he wants to kill half of everyone, no particular reason, just wants to. And I think in the comics he was like trying to impress Death, so there was like at least some reason.
Because
Um,
a man trying to impress a woman will always do stupid things. Yeah, so that makes sense.
sure.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't make sense, but it makes more sense
It
than
makes more
I'm
sense
going
than
to
he
kill
just woke
half of
up.
everyone.
He
And it's
saw
like,
his
well,
own Earth. They
how many years
mismanaged
later will they
resources.
repopulate? 20? Oh, well, that you just killed half of everyone for no reason.
Yeah.
Um, and then 5 years later, everyone comes back, and there's barely any like issues with that. Um,
they pretended there were a few issues here and there, but it really seemed like nothing was a
uh,
big, like,
um,
or as if the world wouldn't have just crashed immediately with half of the people doing jobs
right.
disappearing. That's
And
pilots, air traffic controllers, that's everything. Like,
right. And then half the actors were like done after 10 years of being in these movies, right?
yeah,
Um, that's fair, right?
I can see that.
Because
Yeah,
you're,
you've made your money. But how often do you want to put on a goofy gimmick and go, say I'm going to go save you and
well,
stuff? You
how
want to be
much
an
do you want to
actor
like
again.
stay in that kind of shape for your life, right?
That
Because that
too.
gets
Yeah,
harder as you get older. It gets harder to like, and while you're making these movies, you can't change your appearance at all, right? You can't
yeah.
like dye your hair or wear
The
different
famous
clothes,
mustache issue
whatever.
with Henry Cavill.
Yeah. So it limits other acting work you can do, right?
Yeah.
Um, the guy who played Thor, I think, actually has comedy chops, and he started doing comedies and stuff. But
He
uh,
he can play that like attractive guy that's stupid
yeah,
role pretty well. But I think they're all good actors in the Avengers. Don't get me wrong. I don't, but again, you get pigeonholed as then you're the comic book person.
sure.
And
Um,
Chris Evans somehow went through being in Fantastic Four and that Scott Pilgrim movie, which I've never seen, but that's apparently a comic book movie. And he came out of those and then into this, like he's still smelling like roses somehow.
mhm.
But
Yeah. So then that was over, and then I feel like since then they've tried to like recapture or tried to figure out what story they're going to tell next
yeah,
5 different ways.
yeah, right.
Um, so they got into the multiverse shit, which is, can we curse?
I mean, it doesn't matter at this point. We're in there. We're
No
40 minutes
one's
in. YouTube
no one's
doesn't care. If
listening.
anyone's actually watching,
Um,
yeah.
yeah. They got into the multiverse shit, which is always bad storytelling in my opinion. Because
Well, it's a bit of a cop out. It makes it,
well, I mean, people started enjoying this because it's one unified story, right? Like instead of
and it
every
was easy
movie
to
being its
follow.
own thing, that's easy, you can follow it. And there's like one version of things, so it matters if someone makes a sacrifice or someone dies, right? Because they're not
Yeah,
coming back. Um, and now with the multiverse,
you
nothing
can just kind
matters.
of, eh,
People can die. We'll bring them back. Whatever. It's kind of nihilistic, in my opinion.
yeah,
Um, and then they've done like a bunch of different multiverse movies to like try and introduce the concept in different ways. They had like a TV show with it, and then they had the setup with Kang.
yeah. Well, yeah. Whoops.
And then the actor got in trouble, so they can't do that anymore.
Yeah,
And then I think the Eternals was going to be the next big thing, and
and that
then
was like a wet fart. Nobody cared about the Eternals whatsoever. I mean,
I think there
just
was, yeah, they didn't go anywhere with that. And then they were setting it up to be like, oh, Spider-Man's going to be the new Iron Man leading the franchise. And but then
yeah.
they have trouble making Spider-Man movies because Sony owns the rights to the Spider-Man
There's always
movies,
going to be some issues there. Yeah,
right? So it's just kind of like meandered to where, I mean, I'm just not excited to see anything.
yeah. No, I as far as going into the first, I think it was Endgame, whichever one it was. Going into that, everyone was excited. We still had all the main players. It was a ballsy move at the end to snap away a lot of people. Um, and then at that point, I thought the direction they were going to go was into that stone, the red stone that Thanos used.
Mm,
Find some version of that going there. The minute I heard they were doing time travel, like there were reports coming out that they were doing time travel, I said, "Ooh,
hmm
this isn't going to work."
That's
Because
another one
even
that
with Marvel, well, go ahead.
is another storytelling element that usually doesn't work.
I mean, you have to take care. You have to be
Right.
that has to be your movie. You have to Back to the Future it, where you
Right.
do it with care and you really
I think we both love Back to the Future.
absolutely, yeah. And
Um,
that's why I say you have to Back to the Future. You have to Terminator it, where it matters. In
and
this,
there's
they
some
do.
kind of rules that make sense.
Yeah,
They
this was
changed the
just kind of
rules
like
five times.
this was a get out of jail free card. It
Yeah.
was well, we backed ourselves into a corner. We have no idea how to get out. So we're just going to come up with time travel.
Hmm.
And it's like, well, even though these movies involve gods and a man building an iron robot suit and all this crazy stuff, it was all still semi-believable within the like the framework of the what the world it was. It was all semi. They built upon things, but then to all of a sudden say here's time travel, that lost me,
Hmm.
and so that was not great. And then like you said, the multiverse idea. I don't know if anyone who dies, they can the actors can come back, so they can keep getting paid. But now, we can create a story like they don't know who they're dating because they're dead.
Hmm.
It's just, it gets, like you said, it's very muddled now. Into the second movie and past that, now we've lost all the A players, or most of the A players. They're relying on Spider-Man, like you said, who even him, he's been in this role for like 10 years. It's not like he's a spring chicken.
Hmm.
He's probably close to 30. And again, I don't know if he wants to be Spider-Man his entire life. Who wants to do this stuff?
I mean, it probably
Like,
hurts your knees to like
yeah.
do that kind of acting role, right?
Well, Tobey
Um,
Maguire famously had back problems, either
hmm.
before it or after. I don't know, something. But it's interesting to see that they have this B team now, and they're kind of like, okay, you guys are going to enjoy watching Bucky and them. And I think Sebastian Stan's a great actor, but they've really the Bucky character is just kind of like again meandered,
Hmm.
and I'm not excited. Like I saw Thunderbolts just because I was curious, but I'm not excited about anything they have coming out. Um, Fantastic Four to me looks horrible. It
Hmm.
looks I don't think it knows what it is. It looks I mean I like the pseudo 60s look to it. That's kind of cool, but everything else about the movie just something looks weird.
I
Something feel and I don't
haven't,
like Pedro Pascal. And I just sorry.
yeah, I haven't paid any attention to the Fantastic Four coming up because there have been 15 Fantastic Four attempts, right,
Yeah.
so far, and none of them have been good.
Well, and not only
Um,
that, who gives a shit about the Fantastic Four? It's not like Marvel thinks they have this property here that people are dying to see. Even in the comics, Fantastic Four has never been like a super beloved group. Like
I
they're
think a
below the
lot of people.
Avengers and the X-Men. Like they're probably third or fourth in or like in the hierarchy, but they're not like as I don't think they're as big of a deal as Marvel thinks
I
they
mean,
are
I
this
know
summer. So
people who really love Fantastic Four, like that's
really are
their
they?
favorite superhero comic. Um, I don't have I so I can understand there are legitimate fans for it who are clamoring for let's introduce them into the MCU or whatever.
Yeah.
Which if all they had done with multiverses was like use it to introduce X-Men and Fantastic Four and whatever into their and
New
Spider-Man into
characters, yeah,
the
build out the rosters, yeah.
so that they could start telling different stories.
Yeah.
And I think part of the reason that's challenging is X-Men already did the same thing where they had the series of X-Men movies.
Yeah.
They put kind of an end to it with Logan, and
Yeah.
now then they started doing more with younger
They
people
did a
playing the
second
same
set of X-Men
characters,
movies. Yeah.
which I might have seen some of them. I just don't remember because they were so unmemorable. Um,
I will say the first two with Fassbender were really good. The First
okay,
Class and then the one where they went back to the 60s. But again,
I
that one
don't.
involved Logan and stuff. There was, but again, it was so that there's been like eight X-Men movies in 20 years. That's a lot,
Yeah,
especially when they're all different X-Men every time.
and you know, it's always like a loose canon.
Yeah.
Um, like so, I remember there was some X-Men movie where they had Ryan Reynolds as Deadpool in, but it was like some fucked up version of Deadpool
That
where
was a X-Men version. That was X-Men Wolverine Origins. Yeah.
okay, yeah. Well, like he doesn't have a mouth.
Yeah.
And so it's like literally the nickname of the character is Merc with a mouth, and they took his mouth away. Um, and just doesn't do anything. To then somehow they made another uh movie out of that. They just changed everything about the way the character is portrayed with the same actor,
Well, then they sent
and
him
it
to Japan. Oh,
worked.
well, yeah,
Yeah.
that. I thought you meant how Logan, they sent him to Japan then.
Oh,
But
okay.
it's amazing that wow, the ride they've taken us on. But no, yeah, Dead. It was Marvel was ambitious at that point because that was X-Men Origins Wolverine, and they planned an X-Men Origins for Magneto, which
Hmm.
would have been interesting because they were going to have Ian McKellen, I guess, play his younger self, and he was 1,000 years old at the time. So
So they
that
were
would have
going
been
to do
fun.
like the plastic de-aging thing they did with him
Yeah, that they
and
did. That looked horrible in X-Men 3. Yeah,
Picard. Yeah.
Picard too. Well, that's another thing. Apparently, Ian McKellen is coming back for this new movie coming out next year or the year after the one where the Robert Downey Jr. Doctor Doom
Okay.
Avengers. I don't know what to make of it, but I'm seeing it and I'm already very concerned about this movie because when they showed the cast, it's literally just okay, here's people from this movie 20 years ago. Here's people, remember people from this movie? And then they're all going to be in it. And I don't,
Yeah,
I think they've officially run out. It,
I I can't say I can rise to the level of concerned just because I don't care.
yeah,
Um like it's been a while since I went to one of these movies in a theater.
yeah,
COVID didn't help, but
yeah, right.
um even then like stuff comes out in theaters and then a week later it's on Disney Plus. So
Yeah.
there's no point. But
Even
even
good movies
then,
are doing that. Even movies that do well in the theater are coming out on streaming so soon after that they're kind of neutering theater business, but that's separate.
yeah, I mean we've talked about it for half an hour or whatever, but like I'm not gonna like I didn't see Winter or whatever the latest Marvel, not Captain Marvel, what's the one, Captain America? I didn't see the
Yeah.
latest one of that in the theater, and it's on
Oh,
Disney Plus. I just haven't, like, it would take an effort for me to sit down and like plan out an hour and a half to like spend on watching this. I'm not just hasn't
the one with the Red Hulk.
maybe.
I have zero interest in the one that came out earlier this year.
Yeah,
Zero interest in that. Yeah.
yeah.
They've lost. I think they've lost a lot of people. And now they're saying, "Hey, well, we're bringing Robert Downey Jr. back." And that's cool, but I don't know how much that stuff works where it's like now we're bringing someone back that we just said was retiring.
Hmm.
I think it's officially a sign they're out of steam.
Well, that
And
was like 7 years ago.
yeah, well, that's true, I guess. They were very lucky that that stuff all happened right before COVID because if they had one movie before and then one after, that would have been a disaster.
Mm.
So at least they got those in before. But all right, yeah, no, and then everything is in cycles. Like DC was dead for a while. Now I think DC is about to have a nice pickup, but we can talk about that next week. So I think for now we'll see what happens with Marvel. It'll be fun to not watch the Fantastic Four next month, and
Is
we'll
that
go from
next
there.
month?
I think it's end of next month, but I'm not watching it. Yeah,
Okay.
I got my tickets already for Jurassic World because I always like to see anything with dinosaurs.
Are there more of
Um,
those?
yeah, they're I don't know what they're doing anymore, but it's fun when they get a good scene of someone eating or getting eaten by a dinosaur. I enjoy that.
Okay.
It's because I saw Jurassic Park when I was 7, and it just hit me at the right point.
I
But I
wasn't
also
allowed
got
to
my
see
tickets.
Jurassic Park.
You weren't really?
No, it was too scary. I was told it was too scary. I didn't see
It
it until I
probably
was
was.
like
I
in
was
college.
terrified in the theater. I was terrified. Yeah, I remember that as a
Yeah.
kid. So your parents were probably right. And I got my tickets for Superman, so I'm pumped about that. So, but all right, cool. Rufus, you have anything else to
I'm
any final
I'm
thoughts?
I'm dead inside.
All right,
And
cool.
so I don't have any joy out of film anymore.
I I'm not totally dead inside. I'm partially, but we're working on that.
Well, it's just a void of consumerism and capital, and you're watching this guy whose heart is literally like made of metal, just a a a robot, a void of all human emotion,
Yeah.
and I'm done.
Well, all right. That's a good way to end it, I think, for our first episode. All right. Well, I had a good time. Pleasure talking to you. We will catch up next week on more DC stuff to figure out our history there and get ready for Superman. So, all right, for Rufus and Alex, signing off. We'll see you next time.